Okay. Hi everybody. Welcome to session 4 of the land contracts block tonight. Now, tonight we're going to be focusing our activities on looking at the Form 1. Okay. And so what I'll do is, with tonight's festivities, I'm going to give you a little bit of background, which hopefully you're going to remember. I'm going to be able to it's an old hat to you guys. And just to give you some information about the searches in relation to that, and also look at the format of the actual form, and I'm going to go through the form with you, and then I'm going to, when we get to what I call the columns section, I'm going to actually show you how you link it with the searches. And this is usually the most frustrating part of filling out the Form 1. But once you get it, and it will take a little bit, but once you get it, it will actually become much easier and less mystifying for you. And then what I will do is get you to actually continue the exercise that you started last week. Last week you were filling out a contract for the sale of land. And this week what I will then get you to do as part of the exercise is actually fill out the Form 1 related to that same exercise. But what I will be doing is also giving you the full searches. Last week I only gave you a couple of documents because I didn't want you to get blasted by all the information, essentially. So once we get onto the searches, it'll become a little more relevant, but also a little bit harder for you guys. But once you get used to them, you're no longer fearful about them. It won't be so bad. So the first thing which I need to do is just the background. Now, the Form 1 is a disclosure document. Okay. And when we went back, I think the very first lesson in this series, we talked about what happened in history, and we talked about consumer protection very briefly, remember? And what we recognised was that over the last 50 years, consumer protection has developed quite significantly, hasn't it? We had early acts like the Trade Practices Act and different consumer credit acts and so on, which were aimed at protecting people like you and I. With the Land and Business Sale and Conveyancing Act, that's obviously clearly has also continued on that theme. And with the Form 1, it is essentially a disclosure document. Okay. It's a disclosure document, with the purpose being to ensure that I'm giving you the wrong one there, to ensure that the parties go into the transaction with their eyes open. Okay, with their eyes open. Before we actually look at the form itself, we need to actually also recognise that we must obtain the required searches to fill it out. So the property interest report we would order from the Department of Planning, Transport and Infrastructure dip tie or via salis. Okay. Now, under section 7, we need, with regard to the vendor statement, we're also going to need a council search. Okay. So basically, a request to the relevant council where the property is for their information. Also, we're going to need to ask the vendor about information. And we're usually going to do that, and it's common practice to do that, initially using what we call a vendor questionnaire. Okay? And I'll give you an example of that tonight, which is good practice to get the vendor to actually fill out to provide these details. And last but not least, if the body that is being sold is a strata unit or a community title, then approaching the relevant corporation and requesting, again, the same details, the same search requirements in relation to that property. So potentially we've got the 4 bodies we're going to be seeking information from. And with dip tie, that's going to include responses from government agencies like SA Water, ESL, Lantux, and a register search and valuation details. Now, last week you filled out a contract for the sale of land. Okay. Now, taking it back, now in practical terms, you're going to have to prepare a Form 1, which you're going to be serving on. Who do we serve it on again? My memory's terrible. Purchaser. Thank you. I'm glad you've done this. That. So we said to serve on the purchaser. Now, hopefully, you're signing the last week you were signing the contract, and you gave last week's date, didn't you? Hopefully, you'd have the Form 1 served on the purchaser.
After you sign the contract, straight away.
Same day as the contract.
Possible, yeah.
If we can, can't we? And the reason we want to do that is because, why? Calling off period. Oh, fantastic. Oh, you guys are doing well. Because we want to limit that time for the purchaser to change their mind. Okay? And that's why it becomes very important with regard to these searches, how soon they are done. All right? Okay? The sooner you can get them ordered, the better. Okay? And normally, you may have to refresh them after 90 days.
Oh, that's what I was going to ask. So they're only valid for a certain period, is that right?
Well, yes, well, okay, they're valid, but it's good practice to actually, if you've prepared the Form 1 and 3 months has gone, or it's approaching 3 months, then it's good practice then to actually order new searches, and you may have to do it again. Because effectively, the law basically says is that the Form 1 has to be accurate on the time that it's served. So if you've filled out the Form 1 and it's based on searches you did 5 months ago, what might have happened?
Council rezoning.
Could have had a fencing dispute,
Yeah,
could have had a neighbour dispute.
There could have been many changes. So if you then serve using the old searches, then the Form 1, potentially, it could be inaccurate. Remember, it has to be accurate when it's served, in the making of the or by the time the contract is made. You still with me? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so hopefully, you've got all these searches done. Now, what I want you to do is now just have a look at your vendor statement, and I'm just going to go through a few things on the Form 1. I've called it a vendor statement, Form 1 vendor statement, and I'm just going to go through this form with you. I'm going to highlight a few areas, okay, a few things as we go along. And importantly, when I get to what I call the columns, I'm going to go through an exercise with you to try and make this a bit easier. Okay, so now the Form 1 is in a regulated form. Okay, it can't be altered by you and I. All right, the basis is set in the regulations, and that's what it basically has to look like. You may see a number of industry associations, but it would be AXA, be it the auctioneers and associations, etc., who may have their own little brand on Form 1, and they may have their little motif on the Form 1, but the content has to be exactly the same.
And this is found in the regulations?
Because it's in the regulations, yes. So it has to conform with that. And now, the Form 1 is a very complicated document. And you need practice and learning and experience to complete it. And the truth is, a lot of it may be open to interpretation. So I always find it quite interesting to try and, if I see somebody's doing a lecture or somebody's doing a talk on the Form 1, to try and go along myself, to be quite honest with you, because it's good practice to try and listen to other people's views, because people have different views on the form. The key thing from my perspective is that is to go back to the very... firstly, we have to follow the instructions on the form, but secondly is to also bear in mind what the purpose of the document is all about. And the purpose of the document, as I've already told you tonight, is that it is what? It's a disclosure document. So I always think it's better to err on the side of caution. If in doubt, it's better to disclose than not disclose, if that makes sense. All right? But there are various technicalities in the form which we need to look at. Okay, so the first page we've got, and we'll see that the form is directed to the purchaser. And you'll see we've got instructions to the vendor for completing this form, which we've got at the bottom. And we've got a little box, which means the part division, particular to item, may not be applicable. We've got, if it is applicable, ensure the box is ticked. So when we have boxes to fill out, we may basically tick them. And then we've got, if it's not applicable, ensure the box is empty or strike out the part division and so on. Okay. And when we look at the schedules, you'll see they refer to divisions and particulars, and we'll come on to that a little bit later. Now, on the next page, you'll also see that we have a mention of an asterisk, which means strike out or omit the option that is not applicable. And we've got all questions must be answered with a yes or no, inserted in the place indicated by square brackets or at the side of the question. Now, part A should be very, very simple for us to actually fill out. Just note at the bottom at part A, it says identify the land, including any certificate of title reference. So we always put the certificate of title reference there. Part B details the purchaser's calling off rights and proceeding with the purchase. So to the purchaser, and it details from section 5 the rights to call off. And it basically is telling the purchaser you can notify the vendor of your intention not to be bound by the contract for the sale of the land, unless, and we've got section 5.7 there, the purchaser is one of those designated there. For example, they purchase by auction. And number 2, we've got the calling off notice, time for service must be served. Okay, and again, how long was calling off again? Because my memory's terrible. 2 clear business days from when?
Whichever is later.
Whichever is later of what?
Someone in the contract will serve in Form 1.
Good. Good. When the contract is made, that both parties have signed it and communicated, and the Form 1 is served. Okay, great. Now, so the calling off notice must be in writing and must be signed by you. So a simple notice to call off is detailed. Now, methods of service, number 4. The calling off notice must be, and we've got different methods there, given to the vendor personally, posted by the registered post, last known address, fax, and so on. I like to see that you've at least given an address. You need to make sure you fill that part out and give at least an address for the purchaser to be aware of where to send the calling off notice. That section 5.2 relates to that section there. And then we've got. I'm not going to harp on it, go through this in great detail, but these are things which we need to be aware of. And then we get to part C. Okay. Now, part C of the Form 1. Now.
Excuse me, I got a question. Like the method of service, the cooling off notice must be given to the vendor personally. Is that supposed to be given to the purchaser, like the buyer personally?
No. This is the calling off notice.
Yeah.
This is not the Form 1. So if you're the purchaser, we've already indicated that you have how many days to call off?
2 days.
2 clear business days. During that 2 clear business days, you as the purchaser, what will you be doing?
Inspecting. Yeah.
Thinking about your purchase.
Yeah.
If there's anything in the Form 1 that you're not happy with, then you might go and, for example, seek legal advice. Okay? Now, remember now, you may change your mind. Okay, so if you're going to change your mind, then one of the options to give notice of that you're going to call off would be to give it to the vendor personally. Yeah. All right. Now, Part C. Okay. Now, ordinarily, you would normally get. I mean, my own view is that it's good practice to ensure that the vendor actually signs Part C. All right. Usually, it gives the option, that you'll see there, we of such and such being the vendor, person authorised to act on behalf of the vendor. In my view, you should always get the vendor to sign there. Very limited circumstances when you wouldn't be getting the vendor to sign, you'd be using a person authorised to act on behalf of the vendor, because the one thing that you're doing there is you want the vendor to take ownership, of this document. Okay, so being the vendor in relation to the transaction, state that the schedule contains all particulars required to be given to you pursuant to Section 7.1 of the Land and Business Sale and Conveyancing Act. Okay. Now, so, for example, you're going to be giving the vendor an example vendor questionnaire. Okay, a vendor questionnaire. And in that document, and I'll show you a copy a little bit later, it will have questions for the vendor to actually answer in relation to any knowledge or of interest they actually have in the land. All right? So what you'll normally find is that people can be quite flippant when you ask them a question. You might say, "Oh, are you aware of anything on the land? Anybody's got an interest in this land?" And I'm the vendor. "Oh, I'm the vendor," and I might say, "Oh, no, nothing. No, there's nothing." "What do you mean?" "No, nothing. There's no problem with this land, mate. I've owned it for years. No drama. It's all mine, and mine. Don't worry about it." Right? But once they actually come to actually having to sign something, then suddenly it's, suddenly it's, this is serious. This isn't off the top of my head now and flippant talk. This is serious. I'm going to sign it. So, in my view, we always get the vendor to sign Part C, because they then realise that they've got to take ownership of the information and responsibility of what they've given. And they need to be aware this is important. This is an important document, because if this document is defective, what can the purchaser do?
Pull out, see?
Potentially, they may pull out during the calling off, or even if they go through with the deal and the land is transferred to them and they're not happy because there's something defective in this property, what did you say? They might sue and they may go to court. And when you look at Section 15 of the Land and Business Sale and Conveyancing Act, it clearly indicates that the court has wide discretion as to the remedies that it can give. And, for example, if the purchaser is so prejudiced, the court may be asked to actually order the retransfer of the land. And this is going to cause a lot of financial issues for all of the parties concerned. All right? So the vendors, they have to be aware that this is important stuff.
So what did you say earlier? They have to order what?
The court could order that the lands be retransferred back, even if settlement. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's
and then
and costs and all the rest of it. So it's significant monies here. So the vendors have to be, yes, they've got a lot at stake, and they need to be aware of that. Now, Part D. Okay. Oh, and just on Part C again, just for a moment, we have an asterisk there, don't we?
Yes.
Which says, being the vendor person authorised to act on behalf of the vendor. What was the instructions in the form about an asterisk?
Cross out the inapplicable.
Cross out the inapplicable. All right, so you simply put a line through whoever's not signing it.
Yeah.
All right. Now, Part D. Now, Part D is a certificate with respect to prescribed inquiries by a registered agent. And that's a requirement under Section 9 of the Land and Business Sale and Conveyancing Act. Now, Part D. This is an interesting section because there's been, over the last few years, there's been what I call a bit of kerfuffle about this section. Now, what does it say? Certificate with respect to prescribed inquiries by a registered agent. And when we mean under Section 9, the registered agent is the real estate agent. Okay, the real estate agent. Now, for whatever purpose, a lot of real estate agents have, in practice, have indicated they don't want to sign this section, and they quite often are trying to put the burden onto conveyancers. And conveyancers, are not too sure whether they should sign it or not. But the answer to that is, well, no. This is not for the conveyancer to sign unless they've been specifically appointed by the agent to sign for them, i.e. a separate, because the conveyancer would normally be the agent of the vendor, not the agent of the real estate agent. So unless they've received specific instructions by way of engagement directly from the agent, they wouldn't be doing it. And the section clearly says the land agent. So I think some of it comes down to fear. Land agents are fearful of signing this verification. So let's just read what it says. I, whoever it is, certify that the responses, and subject to the exceptions stated below, the responses to the inquiries made pursuant to Section 9 of the Land and Business Sale and Conveyance Act confirm the completeness and accuracy of the particulars set out in the schedule. So they're confirming the completeness and accuracy. So many agents think, oh, my word, oh, this is scary, this Form 1. Yes, they want to push the responsibility away. This is it. And so, that's an issue, but essentially it's something which the land agent should be doing. And we do see a number of companies that Form 1 companies that who actually take on this role, and they take out additional insurance in relation to this, whereas the conveyancers, for the conveyancing insurance, they must be appointed by the vendor before the agent is engaged, or they must previously have acted for the vendor with regard to their insurance purposes. So essentially, this is the vendors who would sign this, and that's the key there. Now, just moving on. Okay, and we've got schedule. Next page, we've got Division 1, particulars of mortgages, charges, and prescribed encumbrances. And we've got some exceptions here. Section 7.3 of the Act provides that the statement need not include reference to charges arising from the imposition of rates or taxes less than 12 months before the date of settlement of the statement. Okay. Essentially, that is because at settlement, what is normally going to happen?
Adjustment.
There's going to be an adjustment. Good. And that's why that's been put there.
What are you reading out then?
I think we're in the 5th, 6th page, and you'll see the top, Schedule 1, Division 1, particulars of mortgages, charges and prescribed. It refers to Section 7.3. So just after Part D.
Near the bottom of the last couple of paragraphs.
Part D, so the end of Part D.
After Part D.
Yeah, pages on Part D.
Yeah, then that would be... So straight after Part D, you'll see it refers to Section 7.3. Okay. Now,
It'd be helpful
Oh,
to say
particulars of
that.
mortgages,
Would actually, yeah.
prescribed encumbrances.
okay.
Yeah.
And you will also see there that I just want to point out, just 33.1, where a mortgage, it's basically where a mortgage charge or prescribed becomes referred to in column 1 is applicable, and it goes on to say that if the attachment consists of more than 2, we don't need to go through that. Mortgage charge or prescribed encumbrance is one of the following items in the table under the heading 1, mortgage of land, lease, caveat, and so on. And we've got charge 33.1, affecting the land, not including another item, and is registered on the certificate of title to the land and is to be discharged or satisfied prior to its settlement. So they don't need to be disclosed if they're going to be discharged or satisfied prior to its settlement. Right. Now, my own view is that I would prefer to see the mortgage disclosed on the Form 1, especially if it's not being disclosed in the contract for the sale of land. Okay. simply to put the purchaser on notice that somebody has a registered interest on that property. Now, the registered interest will take precedence over an equitable interest, which means that if anything happens with that mortgage, the mortgage holder is going to have first rights in relation to the land, whatever the remedies may be in relation to their dispute, essentially. So 999 times out of 1,000, there's no problem, all right? But I think it's good practice to actually have the mortgage on the title, on the Form 1, sorry. Form 1, yeah.
What about the contract?
The way the new AIC contract is detailed, and I think we looked at this last week. Because it's going to be discharged, we don't need to disclose it the way that the wording is. Yes, under encumbrances. Yeah, I don't mind personally. I don't mind if people put the mortgage down under the encumbrance.
Is there anything wrong with just putting it in the contract, though?
No, it depends on the wording of the contract. Before they change the version of the contract, that one we were looking at, I would have put the mortgage down previously, but in the new wording, I wouldn't put it down in the new wording. But
regardless, you definitely put it in.
I would at least, if you don't put it in one, no, if you don't put it in one, I'd definitely have it in the other. All right, and that's why I'd usually always put it in the Form 1. Now, this is.
Are we putting the mortgage for the new mortgage?
No. This is only what's current. This is not. We're not thinking about the purchaser's mortgage here.
The vendors.
We look at the vendors.
Charged on the property.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Now.
So that's discharge.
Okay. Now, next page we're looking at. We've got the table of particulars. All right. Now.
Yeah.
I'm just going to put this on the board, and you'll see here. So I'm going to work on this with you in a moment. We've got column 1, column 2, column 3. Okay, and you'll see that's on the Form 1. We've got table of particulars, column 1, 2, or 3. Now, I just want to turn you over to. We're going to come back to this in a moment. I'm just going to turn you over. I just want you to have a quick look at number 1.1 on the Form 1. Turn the page over, and you see mortgage of land. Okay, is this item applicable? Okay. All right. In fact, what I'm going to do, we're going to come back to this table of particulars and the instructions. But I think what the best thing for me to do here is give you an example of how we fill out this 1.1 first before I actually talk about this. Otherwise, you may not get it. So, this is what I want to do. And distant students, I want you to do exactly the same. Now, distant students, on Learn, you will find there are searches in relation to this first exercise. Now, some of the searches are bundled together. Now, class students, I want you to put all of your papers, apart from the Form 1, on the floor, and I want them away. All right? I don't want anything to see anything else on your desk.
No cheat sheets.
It's not even cheat sheets. I don't want you getting. I want you to just be focused on the documents I'm going to give to you.
Oh, and this one as well.
Clear? Well, keep your Form 1. Keep your Form 1. Yeah, you keep your Form 1. Everything else I want off the desk.
No writing material either.
Oh no, you can keep your pens. Yeah, absolutely.
No, as in pads, no.
Just your Form 1. That's all right. Okay, now just bear with me a moment. That's right. Now, what I'm giving you first is it's a property interest report. Just clear all that, just keep it just a moment.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, property interest report is one of your searches. So, property interest report, I'm just going to suggest you put it on your left. Now, the next most likely research you're going to do is the council search. So, put the council search. Did I miss you out?
Yeah, you missed us.
I missed both of you out. Come on,
How do you feel?
how do you feel, guys?
He overlooked us.
I overlooked somebody else last
Literally.
week. What a guy. Now,
Unloved.
put your property interest report on your left, and then the next search you've got is the council search. Okay, and put that in the middle. Alright? I'm not doing a control freak here, but I want you to get it. So, property, you've got the council search, which is the most common search you're going to do. Now, in this particular exercise, which we're doing, it's actually a strata situation. So, because it's a strata, there is a third search we need to be aware of, which is the strata one. Now, in real life, you would be ordering all of these separately. Okay? When you see them on Learn or in the exam, all the searches will be lumbered together. So you're going to have to become familiar enough to realise that they are separate searches. And while we're at it, I'm just going to, you've got enough documents in front of you. I'm not going to spoil it. Now, so we're going to now look at how we fill out the Form 1. So distance students pull these searches apart and do exactly what the class students have done. Essentially have a property interest report, perhaps to your left, the council search, perhaps in the middle, and on the right have the strata search. Now, if we go to 1.1, okay, we've got general, we've got mortgage of land. Now, what we need to understand is at the top of every page, we can see that there's an imaginary column 1, column 2, and column 3. And if we put 1.1 here, right, the first thing we need to do is look at the first primary search. And the first primary search is for the property interest report. And let's have a look at the property interest report. Okay, so look at your property interest report. Now, the property interest reports are quite useful and easy, okay, because they're numbered, just like the Form 1. Okay? The councils, on the other hand, some get numbered, some don't, which makes it a bit harder for us, but the headings always have to be the same. So the first thing to do is we look at our first search, which is the property interest report, and when it says mortgage of land, 1.1, what are the instructions given? Refer the certificate of title. Okay, so let's find the copy of the certificate of title in here. Let's find a copy of it. And what does it say about a mortgage?
Mortgage to ANZ.
Mortgage to ANZ. Now, you'll see on the Form 1, okay, so just keep your certificate of title there. And you'll see on the Form 1 we've got mortgage of land. Okay? And on the Form 1 it says, is this item applicable?
Yes.
No, turn the page over.
Okay.
So is that 1.515? What's that number?
1.1.
No, to the right. Oh, that's an is. Oh, okay, yeah, sorry.
Thanks, Julie. They'll call me Dr. Moore at this rate. Okay, so the question is 1.1. Mortgage of land is the heading. Is the item applicable? Now, if we go back to the previous page, it says, if an item is applicable, ensure that the box for the item is ticked and complete the item. So, we simply tick the box. Okay?
So we're talking about this thing here. Yeah.
On the Form 1.
Yeah.
Okay? The next question on the Form 1 says, will this item be discharged or satisfied prior to or at settlement? And we've got two brackets there. Now, this is the vendor's mortgage. So what will happen at settlement?
Discharge.
It will be discharged. So on the previous page, you'll see the instructions.
Yes.
Within the brackets, you clearly write
Yes or no?
yes or no. Thank you. It was in the previous pages. So it's going to be discharged, so we put simply yes. Okay. And it goes on to say, if yes, identify the attachment. So it then goes to say, are there attachments? And we can. So if you wanted to photocopy a copy of the CT, which many people do, okay, they'll write yes in that box, and it says identify. If yes, identify the attachment, and you would simply write copy of certificate of title. So we could have yes, a copy of CT marked Annexure A, for example.
Bill, are we allowed to write on this Form 1? Or is this, are we going to keep this?
We're going to keep it showing. You're actually going to fill it out yourself.
Oh.
Tonight you're going to be filling this Form 1 out.
So
I'm just giving you an example now. I'm just taking you through it, how you do it.
Yes, of course.
This is an easy one.
So
Okay.
I wasn't supposed to write on this then.
Well, you're going to do it anyway in a minute. So I'm not worried, okay, because you're actually going to be filling all of them out. I'm just giving you a couple of examples. So whether you filled it out or not, it doesn't matter. You can do that. That's not a problem. So I'm going to get you to be filling out the rest of it.
Podcast, how's it going?
And the example is going to be.
We've got 9 minutes, thank you. Yeah. Okay. Now, okay, so we go on, and then we'd actually put the number of the mortgage, if registered, and the number of the mortgage was what?
11208658.
Thank you. And the name of the mortgagee, you write it straight from the CT, you don't have to write any more. What's the name of the mortgagee?
Daniel Lane.
ANZ.
Oh, mortgagee, yes.
Yeah, mortgagee. So we write exactly what's there. Australian New Zealand Banking Group Limited. You write exactly what's on the title, nothing more, nothing less.
It's got here single copy only.
Don't worry about that. No, we just write. All the question is asking you who's the mortgagee. So we're just writing that. Okay, now let's go back to the instructions again, the previous page. Now you've got your head a little bit around filling this out. We're going back to the table of particulars where we've got column 1 and column 2 and column 3. Okay. Now, if an item is not applicable, ensure that the box for the item is empty, or else strike out the item or write not applicable or NA in column 1. So let's just have another go now. Let's have a look at 1.3 of your Form 1. Okay, 1.3 of your Form 1. Okay. Now, say we're going to fill this out. Okay. 1.3. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the property interest report, and we look at 1.3. And we read what the instructions of the property interest report says. And 1.3, what do the instructions say?
Do not omit this item.
1.3 on the property interest report. We're looking at the search now.
Restrictive covenant.
Okay. 1.3 of the property interest report says what?
Easement. Refer to the certificate of title.
Restrictive
details of any
covenant.
restrictive covenants as their encumbrance.
As an encumbrance. So again, the instructions on the property interest report are telling us what we have to do. We have to look at the certificate of title. Is there a encumbrance listed
No.
on the and it doesn't appear to be, does there?
No.
Let me just check it myself. I didn't see one. Is an encumbrance listed there? No.
No.
All right? No. So, going back to our Form 1 instructions under the table of particulars, just to continue this, you still with me? Yeah. So, we've got some options here. If an item is not applicable, ensure the box for the item is empty. I don't like that approach. Or else strike out the item. That's okay with me. Or write not applicable or NA in column 1.
Where are we looking? I'm looking
We're now
So this one. So this is
before the columns. You've got the instructions.
There is encumbrance listed in the certificate, right?
Okay, so just no. We're back to the Form 1 now. We've checked the searches, and the searches have said, check the certificate of title. We've checked the certificate of title, and there's no encumbrance on the title. So now we have to look at what entry we're going to put on at 1.3. And on the instructions that the Form 1 tells us, on the page before, I call them the columns start, it tells us that if it's not applicable, you write NA in column 1, strike it out, or leave the box empty. So essentially on our Form 1, with 1.3, what we would simply do is write N.
Under where it says restricted covenant, is it?
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
All right. So under 1.3, you'll see restrictive covenant. Now, you'll see when you actually look at the Form 1, okay, what we need to understand is this. Most of the entries on the Form 1 are going to be not applicable. It's not trying to trick you. Okay, every piece of land that's going to be bought and sold will have various different interests. Most of the time, you'll find they're not applicable. So don't think that I'm trying to trick you. This is a systematic approach. You check the searches, and you put the answer accordingly. Okay. Now, so far, we've only had to look at the certificate of title, the property interest report. But I'll give you another example now. We're going to look at 4.1. Okay? So 4.1, I'm running it out of space on the board.
Development Act 1993.
So we're going to look at how filling out 4.1. So 4.1 on the Form 1. Now, again, remember, we have to look at our searches to do this. And the first thing that we do is we look at the primary search, which is the property interest report.
Time.
Time, thank you. Yep, I've got 42